Good morning, everyone. My name is Karen Hyde. I'm your presiding member today. Welcome everybody to the Metro Outer Development Assessment Panel for Tuesday the 8th of July at 9:30 a.m. Declare the meeting open. I acknowledge we're hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia and pay respects to elders past and present and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters and community. The meeting will be run in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders 2024 under the Planning and Development Assessment Panel's Regulations 2011. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website in accordance with Regulation 42A of those regulations. Members are reminded to announce their name and title prior to speaking, and panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. I'll now introduce our panel for today. As I say, my name is Karen Hyde. I'm the presiding member. I have Clayton Hine to my left, deputy presiding member. Further to my left, Dale Page, specialist member, and in the room with us, Councillor David Good, local government DAP member, City of Gosnells, and on screen, Councillor Karen Baynes, local government DAP member, City of Gosnells. Item 2, we have no apologies. Item 3, we have no members on leave of absence. Item 4, noting of minutes. Previous minutes are available on the DAP website. We'll move then to Part B of our agenda for the City of Gosnells. And first of all, I'll seek a declaration of due consideration. Can members please raise their hands to acknowledge they've duly considered all documentation in Part B of the agenda and Part B related information? We have had a couple of Regulation 13 responses. Thank you. That's due consideration given by all. Disclosures of interest. Haven't received any to this point. Did members have any disclosures that they wish to make? No. Can I please ask the elected members, was this considered at council? No. Okay, so we have no further declarations to make. We will move forward then with the item and presentations associated. Item 3.1, Lot 16, number 100 Spring Road, Thornley, for 15 group dwellings. Presentations, we have one today, limited to 3 minutes. I know you've done this before, just encourage you to make the key points succinctly and then we will invite questions from panel members, and after that then we'll go to the officers. So we have a presentation from Andra Biondi from Urbanista in support of the application. So when you're ready.
Thank you. Do I need to move or can I?
You're fine there.
I'm fine here, fantastic. Okay, well, good morning, presiding member, deputy presiding member and councillors. It's good to be in the room. I just wanted to thank the city for their positive recommendation and all their support in assisting and assessing the application. So to provide a brief and quick overview, we're proposing 15 group dwellings here. We can theoretically achieve 19, but with site planning layout responding to the context, we're proposing 15. So 2 of those 15 dwellings are 2-storey and they're oriented towards the back of the development adjacent to the POS at the rear. It's a mix of 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom and we've got compliant residential parking in the development. In terms of the context, it's close to the Thornley train stations, it's located close to the Spencer Village shopping area, and obviously there's abundance of parks in the area. It's an excellent infill site and we believe it responds appropriately to the density and the context of the area. In terms of the area, there's a mix of single and group dwellings. This is a little bit more intense than some of the adjoining properties. However, the way we've designed it, responding to the street, oriented to the street, we believe it fits within the context. So although there's good access to services and amenities, there are some existing challenges associated with this area in terms of antisocial behaviour. Let's park that for a moment. For us, this was a strong landscape-led design. So you'll see on the landscaping plan, we've got an abundance of green areas. We've got an abundance of green area on the street, within the communal areas, and also within the private areas of the development. So just to provide an overview, we are proposing to retain 2 of the trees that exist on the site we're proposing 5 street trees, 7 trees in the common area and 18 trees in the garden area. And that brings us to a total of 32 trees across the development. You'll also know, as per your R13 as well, regarding the landscaping, that we do exceed the 15% minimum requirement for each lot. And we think it's a strong proposal in terms of its landscaping design. Conditions 2A and 4, as recommended by the city, we don't agree with. And it's not clear, it's just not clear to us what it's trying to achieve. So just to step back quickly for a moment, our elevation shows a visually permeable fencing at the termination of the common driveway, and the rest will be solid fencing, and that's to protect the privacy of residents in the outdoor living areas, and that accords with the objectives for a mix of protecting the outdoor living areas and then openness and passive surveillance towards the POS at the rear. We are proposing to also, as I mentioned before, retain 2 trees. We have looked at that quite extensively with our landscape architect, and he is of the view that we can retain those trees. Obviously, that's subject to further detailed design, and we're happy to accept a condition that requires that further detailed design of those retention of those 2 trees. And I'll just quickly wrap up because I'm at my 3 minutes. Just to confirm, the storerooms can also, that are detached, it's not uncommon to see storerooms detached from dwellings in a multiple dwelling scenario or an apartment building. So we think it's appropriate at an R60 density to allow that for a couple of dwellings and ensure that those dwellings are efficiently designed within their lot, and that can be maintained on the build strata. Thank you so much.
Lovely, thank you very much. I'll refer to panel members for questions, and I might refer first to Councillor Baines. Did you have any questions of the presenter?
Not at this stage, thank you.
Okay, I can come back to you. Panel members in the room, Councillor Good, did you have any questions of the presenter?
Not at this stage also, actually. Still thinking.
I can come back to you. Member Page, did you have any questions of the presenter?
Yes, just a couple, thanks. So the issue of the 2 trees, there was some commentary made in the R13 response about the fact that buildings and fencing are proposed within the structural root zone of those trees. And when I looked at those plans, it does look a bit squeezy in those trees. So I guess I'm wanting to know, you've said you intend to keep them. How confident are you that you will be able to? And how far are you prepared to go? You talked about detailed design. How far are you prepared to go to make changes to accommodate those trees?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and through the presiding member. Clement, our client, is also in the room, and we've had extensive discussions with landscape architect Clement and the designer regarding this. So my understanding is under the Australian standards, so you have your protection area around the tree depending on the size, and you have up to a 10% encroachment. In some instances, it can be a little bit more. And we believe that we're within that 10% for both of those trees. And we've actually made adjustments. So the one within the communal area, we've made an adjustment to the boundary and also the internal driveway to make sure we can accommodate that tree. And that was part of our last set of development plans that were submitted to the city. The tree within the rear, we're also quite confident that we can, in the rear of one of the dwellings, that we can retain it. And we can look at other measures in terms of, how we do the retaining and the outdoor living area to make an adjustment. We've also discussed that we will look at appropriate measures during the construction phase and protecting those trees. That's vitally important, and getting out the appropriate consultant in order to assess that.
Thank you. Just another one, if you don't mind. So condition 5 requires that alternative colour tones and materials shall be used for each dwellings. Do you understand what is required by that condition?
Yes, I believe we do. So some variation, some tonality in the development. We're happy to look at that. You'll notice from our development plans, we don't provide colours on our elevations, so we're happy to accept that condition.
Okay, and then just lastly, your concerns about condition 2A and 4 about the visually permeable fencing to that. You raised the issue of antisocial behaviour in the area, but surely antisocial behaviour is lessened when there is casual surveillance of a space. So wouldn't it be more appropriate to have that visual permeability to help.
Through the presiding member, thank you for the question. Look, it's about, for us, weighing up what's important to residents as well as what's going on in the park. And that's why we believe this compromise of having visual permeability at the end of the driveway is the most appropriate. The other parts of the development are quite, or the rear parts of that development are quite separated and far away, particularly from the active area of that park where the playground is. So you'll notice if you look at an aerial, the park is in the central part. So in terms of passive surveillance as well, it will be obstructed anyway. There's a lot of vegetation within that park. So really what we're trying to achieve is maintaining safety for our residents and children associated that would, live in these dwellings. So having excessive visual permeability would probably most likely lead, in my view, to an undesirable outcome, because you will find residents will go up and put screening along there anyway in terms of, additional sort of non-permeable materials, which will lead to a poorer outcome. So having a mix of solid fencing and boundary walls that are appropriately rendered, and we're happy for the anti-graffiti coating condition as well, in our view, is a much more responsive design to the context of the area.
Any questions? Page, any questions? Member Hyam, questions?
Can I ask then, as a follow-up to that, why didn't the overall design address the park?
It's not really, the park is, it's just an open area with lawn and trees. It's not really
It's fine.
it's not a playground.
Yeah.
I'm happy to step in with that one. Look, it is a irregular shaped block. It did have its challenges in terms of providing access and sort of providing a frontage. We felt that it was more important to provide a frontage where possible to the street, and we've been able to do that. And look, there's going to be, we don't have overall, whilst we do have a frontage to the park, we're also at the very back of the park, as I just said, where the city has now mulched a certain area. The park's not very well lit. We're next to a train station. There are issues in the area. And so this, with respect to the fencing and it being permeable, there's an opportunity for us to do that in the future. There's no reason why we can't do that. But at the moment, all other properties have got solid fences to the park. Until that park is really upgraded, which we will help to do with our cash in lieu as well, with respect to the public open space upgrade, then we can look at sort of interacting with the park a bit better. But at the moment, I guess what we have the potential to do is invite people into sort of the rear of this development by having a certain area permeable and having outdoor areas that are open style fencing and that sort of stuff. So it's unfortunately sort of the area is transitioning with respect to the zoning that's put in place, and it will improve. But at the moment, it's just all we're going to do is really attract undesirables, and there's a bit of a concern there with respect to privacy and with respect to the city's policy on development abutting public open space. It talks about surveillance, yes, but then it also talks about an appropriate level of privacy and things like that. So we see privacy is more important than surveillance at this stage. But notwithstanding, we just in terms of how we see 2A was, that condition was slightly confusing in that it's a bit open in terms of how we satisfy it. So we understand that if we look at the rear of our property, we have units 15, the common driveway, and then unit 10, which abut the park. I think the city is happy with unit 10 having a solid fence, and obviously will provide us set of schedules and materials to maybe to deal with that and try and put some interaction into it or some sort of design feature or something. It was unit 15 and the common driveway, which I think were intended to be open or have permeable fencing. We're happy with that common driveway area to have some sort of visual permeability, so there is some interaction or some openness, but it's really unit 15 that we'd like to have solid, like unit 10. That would sort of ensure that those outdoor living areas are protected. There's privacy there, and and I guess with respect to the common driveway, at least there is some visual surveillance of the from the development to the park. And when that park is upgraded, you may find that some of the units 15 and 10 may choose to sort of, I guess, do some work and have a gate or some access to the park or some change their fencing. But at the moment, it's just we elevate privacy and safety above visual surveillance of the park. But in saying that, we also do provide that from Unit 15. It's a 2-story unit, so you do have visual surveillance of the park from that unit. Sorry, and Unit 11 is 2-story as well. So it's but with respect to the wording of Condition 2, it's just a bit unclear in terms of which units and what areas are to be visually permeable fencing and which we're allowed to have a solid style. So if we could just get some clarity on that, perhaps from the city, and have that condition to be a bit tighter. That's, I think, the intent of what we're trying to say.
Just as a follow-up then, if antisocial behaviour is a problem, aren't you just compounding it by creating blank walls to the park? Isn't it just going to then add to the problem?
Look, I grew up in the area, so I know sort of. I think that's it's sort of. I know on one hand what you're saying. If this was, I guess I understand what you're saying, but look, with respect to the proximity of the shopping centre, the train station, and Langford being next door, there is just the potential for you to not be at home for most of the day. People to be able to see into your outdoor living area. That's with units 15 and 10, and just to attract people into your backyard. Perhaps if you've got a 1.2 metre step and then visual permeability, it's easy for them just to step over and away they go. But so I think sort of by leaving those outdoor living areas exposed, it's sort of it's not great during the day. There is some visual surveillance when you're at home, of course, of what's going on with respect to the park. But it's very easy for someone to just come and jump over. And like I said, there's things there that are lacking at the moment with that park in terms of lighting and just upgrading it. And I think once those things are done, and the other properties may be redeveloped, there's an opportunity for that park to be a bit more useful and safer, and for you to maybe have visual permeability or a gate out there which you can access. But at the moment, it's just you're really going to be inviting some issues. I believe if you've got visual permeable fencing facing the park.
A question?
Yes.
The site cover for each of the units exceeds the scheme, I suppose, or the arcades. If the site cover was in compliance, would that add to the private open space for each unit?
Yeah, as far as I understand, we're it's 150 and 120. The average is 150 square metres and 120 is minimum. So based on the calculation, we're able to achieve, I think, 19 group dwellings on the site. So with the 15, some of that extra space is accounted for with respect to the common driveway, and it's just due to the irregular nature of the site having to manoeuvre through the property. But some of the I guess the dwellings they are larger. We've got some up to 180 square metres. 150 comfortably we sort of achieved with a lot of them, 160, 172. So we are able to sort of, I guess, have slightly large group dwellings. Nothing is really too tight, but and I think that the outdoor living areas that we have are generous, and they do face the park as well. So at least they sort of are outdoor living areas which to the rear face the open space. But it is very difficult with respect to the site coverage when you've got an irregular shaped site and you've got access like we do, trying to keep it off the street and in the central area of the development. So there is a bit of space lost with respect to parking and bins and those sorts of things. But I think we do achieve a nice level of sort of openness across the development for the units that face the street, and also the ones that face the park. So I think there's a nice mix here in terms of addressing the street as well as the park and the openness that we have around the development for these units.
And final question is in relation to the bin store and the introduction of FOGO. The waste management plan says that there is sufficient room to accommodate an additional 240 litres for each unit. So that's 15 FOGO bins. Where are they going to be located?
Yeah, through the chair. My understanding is that once the FOGO is introduced, it can reduce the number of general bins. And the waste management plan, the waste consultant rather, has had an opportunity to make sure and assess that that bin store is sufficiently sized for the number of bins across those three types of bins.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Good.
Excuse me, presiding member, through the the City of Gosnells doesn't do FOGO. The City of Gosnells waste to energy, so we don't have the third bin, and we actually use in the new waste to energy plant, the first one in Australia. Our rubbish right now is going to the first one that's being built, so we don't do FOGO. That was we started that about 20 years ago. It's only into operation in the last 12 months, so just for the record, the City of Gosnells doesn't do FOGO.
All right, good clarification, thank you. Did you have further questions? Okay, I have a few questions. You talked about the stores for lot 8 and 9. Lot 10 also has a slightly detached store as well to the end of the common driveway. What's the reasoning for those being detached from the properties? And can they not be, can the plan not be resolved to have them accommodated within the individual lots or within the individual built form, as with all the other properties?
Thank you for the question. So during my presentation, I touched on wanting to make, in terms of those 3 units, we wanted to make sure that the internal efficiency of those units are achieved. And we just felt with the design that those 3 units particularly, so 8, 9 and 10, 10 is quite an interesting lot shape, so that does present challenges for us in terms of the internal entry and maintaining the amenity associated with that, and then accommodating the parking. And 8 and 9 as well, so we're still trying to achieve that internal amenity for those units. We just felt that the storeroom was better placed there.
Okay. And you've got, is it 3 with disability access where you've looked at those additional dimensions? I think is it lot 8, 9 and 12? Have you looked carefully at the other layouts in the sense of where doors open? You've got a lot of internal laundries that are in the middle of the house, which, you know, when the screens are open, potentially block access through the house. You've also, with lot 15, again, you've got overlaps with the laundry, which is near the front door, where the front door opens. Are those things that get resolved at the point of building permit, or how do you propose to deal with some of those circulation issues?
Yes, they'll be done in building permit, because instead of having 2 doors, we can do the sliders, the 3 sliders. So we can slide all on one side, or we can even have those like the bifold.
Yeah.
On
Yeah. I think even with the bifold, it's potentially quite squeezy, so I would encourage you at the point that you're looking at your internal fit out, it's beyond us, but have a look at whether you can, as you say, use sliders to give yourself a little bit more circulation in some of those places, because the plans do look quite constrained in many ways. Just going back to the plans, you've got a number of internal spaces where you seem to have taps and things like that. What's the function of those little spaces on the boundary? And I know for the disability units, it's hatched and it says staff access only. who are the staff and how are they accommodated?
You mean onto the small courtyard?
Yeah,
To the site?
yeah,
Because I built another development in Morley, that access is really good for the light to come in.
right,
And also we put some pot plants, so you have to water some of the pot plants so that when you walk out in the back, you can see some greens on the side.
right,
So it's only accessible for the staff because if you have to comply with the members, the people, the tenant,
yeah,
because on SDA,
yeah,
wheelchair. So if you have to design it,
Yeah,
you have to take a
okay.
lot of space. Yeah.
okay.
So we only limit to staff.
And who are the staff and where do they stay? And also there's reference in the Tallis Waste Management Plan that the bins will be taken onto the street, because I think the intention is for local government collection, isn't it? The bins will be taken onto the street by the strata manager or caretaker. So where does the caretaker stay? Is that on-site or off-site?
They stay on site. That's why we have 3 bedrooms. The reason why we moved the store over because we have to design it for at least 2 participants in one house, and they have to have a overnight stay,
Right,
like a room for the nurses or the care.
right. Okay, so that's what those guest bedrooms are for.
That's right.
And you don't need to have shower facilities, there's just a toilet and a sink next to those. You don't need to have bathroom facilities for them,
They sometimes just use the bathroom.
the en-suites. Okay, all right, thank you for that. I don't have any further questions. Councillor Good, do you have questions?
A couple of questions. With the design, and we talked previously about surveillance and antisocial behaviour, etc. Will the people who reside here, will they be owner-occupiers or renters, or I should say owners in their own right? The reason I ask the question is, will they have their own, for example, a lot of video, audio, front security cameras on their doors? Many people are installing them. Is that part of the project that will be done? Or if you buy it, you put your own front doorbell on which has video and audio?
I think separately, like they will have their own audio video. Yeah. And also for, because we have already got some pre-sales, most of them are young families, like with young kids. That's why it's good to have that privacy to the backyard because they're young.
They'll generally be sold to owner-occupiers. Okay. So there might be, will there be people who actually, like, will there be any caretaking type on site?
Caretaker will be living on site with the participants, and there are only 3 units that are for SDA purposes. Because we don't want to have a bit of mix with the people, so that the SDA people can be living with the normal people as well. It's a good outcome for the social.
Thank you.
There won't be a manager of the development or anything like that, David. It'll be, it'll be basically people be able to install their own CCTV if they choose to do so. And you might have that with some of the dwellings that face the street and the park. Yeah.
I'd almost expect that nowadays. It's extraordinarily common where every second or third house is getting it because they're so cheap.
Yeah.
So they got a camera, and we, the city, also have a scheme where people apply it and we give them a rebate for installing a CCTV. The camera footage is actually remarkable, so very good surveillance. And I would imagine, I mean, I have one at my front door. I imagine
We could
quite common.
let obviously potential buyers know about that scheme that's
Or we
available.
can put into the part of the building specs, because I'll be building it.
Did you have further questions?
No, I'm right. Thank you, Presiding Member.
Thank you, no, that's all right. Councillor Baines, did you have any questions at this point?
No, thank you. I also had questions about the staff and caretakers, but that's been covered. Thank you.
All right, lovely. Do we have any other questions for the presenters? We can come back to them, but we can move ahead now. Thank you for your presentation. We have officers from the local government, Brenton Scambler and Felicitas Dilweo. I'll invite members to raise questions with the officers. Councillor Baines, do you have questions of the officers? No? Councillor Good? Yes.
Yes, I do. Regarding the clause 2A in particular, what's the planning, Mr. Scambler?
Yeah, so the city's LPP requires that certain areas be provided with passive surveillance to public areas, so that applies to POS. It doesn't relate to the whole boundary, and we are mindful that certain areas of properties are, I guess, you're wanting to achieve some level of privacy, particularly to outdoor living areas. However, we didn't think it was appropriate that those two dwellings, 15 and 10, which face the POS, to have a solid 1.8 colour bond fence for that whole boundary, primarily for passive surveillance of the park. Obviously, antisocial behaviour element has been discussed at length, and we do identify through that policy that there are certain areas of the private spaces that should be afforded by the higher fence. But when we've looked at it on balance, we've already permitted boundary walls to that POS. So on whole, we think it's only appropriate that the remaining portions of those lots have at least part of it, not to the very private areas throughout the living area, but at least part being given some level of passive surveillance area.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Page, did you have questions of the officers?
Yes, please. And I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but I'm seeking your confirmation. Is there any policy mechanism you have whereby the city can require the retention of trees on the lot?
Not currently, no.
Okay. How will you ensure that the deep soil areas and trees to be planted in each courtyard are constructed and retained in perpetuity and not paved over?
So effectively, like all councils and local governments in the state, obviously we assess on a plan what is going to be provided and ensure that that's compliant. We'll go out and do our occupancy inspections, and we'll ensure that those trees are in at that point. But you're right, there is a broader compliance issue for the ongoing maintenance and retention of those trees. If we see via aerial photos that those trees aren't there, we have in some instances advised owners that they're required to be put back. But outside of that, there's nothing in the city's planning frameworks that require them to be maintained in perpetuity. And I think that's probably something that needs to be reviewed in the upcoming R-codes review.
Thank you for that. In terms of the location of this site, does the city have any existing issues with commuter parking on the streets in this area, and how would that impact this development? Because I noticed the report talks about discretion sought for the number of visitor parking bays, and one of the reasons used is, well, there's on-street parking available. But noting the location of this site, do you have issues with commuters parking on these streets?
Not that I'm aware of. The station itself has quite a large number of bays available, and then it's also has high-frequency bus routes running into that. But I haven't been aware of any parking issues occurring on the streets in this part of Fleming, no.
Okay. Just a couple more quick ones, please. So condition 15, the second paragraph to that, could you just clarify why that is not an advice note, why you've included it as a condition? Wouldn't it be better suited as an advice note?
It's one of the city's standard conditions, and we feel that it's easier for us to keep it all in one condition rather than having to flip to and from. If you wish to make an amendment to that and include it as part of an advice note referencing condition 15, that's fine. It's just the standard way that the city apply that condition, and that's how we've worded it, just so it's all in one.
Okay, thank you. And then similarly, condition 16 seems to relate to matters covered by different legislation. Why is that not an advice note? Why have you put that as a condition?
That's an environmental health requirement of the city, and that prior to the occupation, they require that we have that certification. Obviously, if there was no DA, then it wouldn't trigger that requirement. So the development specifically is triggering the need to provide us with that certification, and our environmental health team rely on the DA process for that to happen.
Okay, Thank you. That's it from me. Thanks.
Thank you. Member Hyam, questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. I have some questions. The applicant, and it follows on from earlier questions, the applicant has asked for some clarity around condition 2A. Is there anything more that, having heard the discussion this morning, and noting that your preference is for a level of permeability, is there a proportion of those fences for those properties that you require to be permeable and other proportions that you require to be solid?
The policy doesn't specifically outline a percentage of the boundary. Obviously, the preference is that the whole boundary would be permeable. However, we do acknowledge that there are certain areas, i.e. closed drying areas and the like, that are, I guess, probably need to be afforded a higher level of privacy. And so for those reasons, we haven't included a specific percentage in the condition. And it would be that we're happy to work with the applicant in terms of getting a good outcome. But I guess for us, it's about providing that passive surveillance through to the POS. And it kind of works both ways, that if people in the park think that they are being seen, they're probably less likely to be antisocial. And then equally, it provides a level of cross that if there's people in the park and someone is maybe thinking of doing something a little bit inappropriate at the back fences, they may be less inclined to do so because they have that, they are visually seen. But I take the point that they want some privacy, and we're happy to work with them on that.
Thank you for that answer. Further to my question of the applicant regarding those stores for lots 8, 9 and 10, which are detached from the properties, did you have discussions with the applicant about relocating those, or are you, in your review, comfortable with them being detached? 8 and 9 seem to be right in the middle of the development and the entranceway. It's almost
not specifically. It's a little unusual in a group dwelling scenario to have them detached. However, in a multi-residential, it's quite, it occurs quite a lot. We did have a look at them, those two stores, and did think that they could probably be a little better located. However, given how tight the site is, and obviously the desire to retain a tree, the other tree where possibly they could be relocated to, it kind of seemed to be the best location for them without then, potentially losing another visitor car bay or something to redesign them to be consolidated as into one area. So it was the location of those 8 and 9 storerooms probably isn't ideal. However, given the context of the site, it probably was difficult to try and source them elsewhere.
Okay, thank you. And the little internal courtyards, I think the applicant referred them to, where you've got the taps and whatnot. Was that included or not in the city's assessment of private open space?
Wasn't really included in private open space calculation,
Okay.
no.
Lovely, thank you for that. And just referring to condition 21, which talks about the construction management plan required, there's no mention in those dot points or the preamble regarding tree protection. So how, during construction, particularly understood what you said about in perpetuity, but should there be something in condition 21 that does refer to that?
I guess, you're right. It probably could reference it. Typically, if you are proposing to retain a tree on site, you'd need to refer to the Australian standard.
Yes.
It should be kept in accordance with the Australian standard. Given that they're shown for retention, obviously the city didn't apply a condition requiring that they protect the trees in accordance with the standard, because the standard otherwise should be followed anyway. But happy if that's something that you wish to include in that. I've got no objection to that.
Okay, thank you. That's all from me at this point. Councillor Good?
Madam Presiding Member, I do apologise. I need to make a minor comment to the presenters earlier.
You can go back and ask them a question.
It's actually really just a comment, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. On the transport impact statement under the executive summary, you may laugh because it's the third point down. It says Thornley Station is located 200 metres east of the subject site. It's west.
Yeah.
Oh, good, you did know that. I thought, I'll just double check. So at least you know I do read the impact.
My apologies, councillor Good. That's
Not a problem. Thank you. I meant to say it earlier, but I forgot.
No problem, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions of the city staff? No? We're all good. Thank you for your responses. We will move ahead then with the item. And we have a responsible authority report which recommends that we approve this development subject to a number of conditions and advice notes. So I will seek a mover for that in the first instance.
To move.
Thank you, Councillor Good moves. Is there a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Baines seconds. Councillor Good as mover, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, please, Madam Presiding Member. You said earlier in the meeting that's an irregular shaped, unusual piece of land, and it certainly is. I congratulate you on the fact of trying to maximise the space, but still allowing sufficient room per unit, because it is an awkward piece of land. So to see 15, and I think you may have said, and quote me if I'm wrong, it could cater for 19, but the fact that it's 15 units, 12 and 3 respectively, and their sizing, I thought the size of the units were actually really good. I was expecting a lot less, as you know, I was expecting between 100 and 130 square metres, and they're significantly larger than that. So I think it's good medium density. I think it meets the majority of the planning framework. I think it'll suit the area very, very well. I caught the train in today. I parked at the train station, and there was, for the first time ever, a state government actually built a train station with enough car parking in one particular spot. So it was actually good. Stacks of parking today, and I've actually tested it several times. So I think it meets it. We've covered off most of the issues. With regards to the surveillance and crime, etc. in the area, that is a surprise to me as such, but I'm certainly hoping and encouraging that people will report crime and get it down and reduce it down. The corresponding factors, as people do come off stations, they come around, they could go up that part of Spring Road. I get that, but I think it's overall a very good development. I'd love to see it being built and improve the area, and the transit-orientated development and medium density towards train station. It meets those objectives and a very good quality outcome, I would think. So I'm happy to recommend it.
Thank you, Councillor Good. Councillor Baines as seconder, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Presiding Member. I also agree with Councillor Good. I think it's a fantastic development for an area that's been underutilised for a while now. You know, nowadays with the high demands for housing, I think that having this development will be fantastic, and also just having more people around will contribute to reducing that antisocial activity, I hope. I had concerns about removing all those trees, but I'm very glad to see that they have a planting scheme in place to replace a lot of them, plus more. So fantastic, I'm supportive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other speakers for the motion, for or against? Member Page.
Thank you, Presiding Member. So, look, given the extra detail provided in response to the Reg 13 request for information and the information provided in response to questions today, I'll be support the recommendation for approval. It proposes much needed accommodation in a location well suited to medium density housing close to existing services and public transport. Proposal is generally consistent with the applicable planning framework. I think the form and the scale of the development or the dwellings will suit comfortably within the existing context of the site, and it won't have any negative impact on neighbouring properties or the streetscape. I initially had some reservations about the width of the access leg and the potential for inconvenience that might arise when two vehicles are moving in opposite directions. But I think given the separate branches of the access legs are quite short, I'm comfortable this doesn't pose a safety issue, which would have been a deal breaker for me. And I guess the the balance is that that narrower width reduces the amount of internal hard stand in the heart of the development, so comfortable with that. A little bit disappointed we couldn't keep more trees. I understand the need to optimise your development potential, but it's a bit sad that some of those trees can't be retained, and I'm not entirely convinced that the 2 trees flagged for retention will survive, given the buildings and fencing are proposed within the structural root zone, which might affect their health. But I recognise the lack of any underlying statutory or policy mechanism to enforce the retention of trees on a lot like this. We can incentivise retention through the codes, but we can't enforce. And I hope that through the revised landscaping plan to be provided, that all efforts are made to protect those 2 trees, shown on the plans, both during construction and on an ongoing basis. I'm comfortable with the parking provision on the site. There is discretion being sought for 3 bays instead of 4, but I'm satisfied that given the availability of on-street parking and all the parking that Councillor Good referenced, which is a very big plus in this area, and the proximity to public transport, that parking demand will not be an issue. I'm not moving it, and I'll speak to it now. I'm not comfortable to delete the conditions that you've requested, 2A and 4. I do believe that fencing on an open space actually increases the problem that you're concerned about, and hopefully in conjunction with the city there a balance can be found. It doesn't seem that the city wants the whole fence to be open, and so I think if some common sense comes into play there, that you can find the balance between open and closed fencing there. So I'm not supportive of deletion of those, but otherwise supportive of the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Hyam.
Thank you. Look, I'm going to support it, but I must say I think it's an opportunity lost for the subdivision not to have addressed the open space or the parkland. And it seems to me that, and I note that the WPC have delayed making any decision on the subdivision subject to working as a residential development. Seems to me that a different subdivision could have worked better for me, but I understand that this is the one we need to deal with. I accept that it generally complies with the planning framework, but I feel it's very tight. And I'm a little concerned for the amenity of the occupants in the future. But I'm prepared to go along with it. I think there could have been more open space or private open space for the units, because it is a very, very tight development. And I don't necessarily accept the shape of the lot as a reason for coming up with design like that. I agree with Member Dale about the fences along the park, and I think there needs to be more transparency or better surveillance there. And I note that the officers are not suggesting it to 100%. There will be some private areas and some open areas. So having said that, I'm prepared to support the proposal, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'll speak to the motion. I too had some concerns when I first looked at this and I studied the plans. However, I understand that you have struck a balance between certain aspects of amenity and obviously there's a commercial reality in all of these things which comes to play. So I'm comfortable to support the motion to approve this. I think there would have been some value in this going through a design review. I note that the city generally only applies those to developments above, or for 3 stories and above. However, I think given the constraints of the site and the complexities that the applicant has had to deal with, that would have been a valuable input to this. And I think a number of the aspects that we have asked questions around tree retention, surveillance of the park, the distribution of storerooms, etc., and indeed in the internal circulation as well, could well have benefited from a process of that nature. That said, when looking at the R codes generally, for group dwellings of this nature, it's broadly compliant, and certainly is very well located to create a level of intensity within close proximity of the train station, which I think you can almost see at the end of the road. So I think it's an excellent notion to intensify, and I think the scale of generally single story with a couple of 2 stories, and one of them is really more of a loft second story, is very fitting with the area. And I think you were right not to go to 19 dwellings and to stick with 15, given the complexities that we've all mentioned. I don't see it having any adverse impacts on other areas. I trust that you'll be able to manage the location of the bin stores and any emissions, etc. from those. I think they're all enclosed, so hopefully they can be maintained adequately. I do note that the way that you've organised the layout does actually limit some of the solar access and ventilation, which is really unfortunate, and that probably goes back to my earlier comment around the potential for design review, providing some level of improvement to that amenity. I'm not concerned about the variation to the visitor parking. I think that that's very minor. And again, I'm comfortable with there being sufficient manoeuvrability on the site generally, apart from I do think those stores perhaps impede manoeuvrability. I too have concerns about the retention of the trees, but I note the city's suggestion that the Australian standards adequately deal with those, so I don't propose to include any amendments to those conditions. And I share the other members' views around condition 2A and 4. And as a result of my questioning, I'm comfortable that the city and the applicant can work together to find the right balance between permeable fencing and solid fencing in those critical locations to assist with surveillance of the park, but also not so that residents and tenants feel that they're completely enclosed and protected from something which, over time or even now they might not need to be protected from. So I'm not proposing to amend those conditions. I wish you luck with this development, and I hope very much that it gets on the ground and that the young families that you've spoken of can find much wanted accommodation so close to public transport and other facilities. So thank you. With that said, it's back to the mover to write a reply, close debate, should you wish to.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Member. Yes, I'm very supportive of, as I initially said in my movement. I just hope you get builders to construct it in a reasonable level of time. It's hard work getting anything built at the moment, so otherwise I hope it can be done because it will provide extra accommodation for people.
Thank you, Councillor Good. We'll put this motion as per the RAR to the vote. Those in favour? That's a unanimous decision of the panel. Thank you. Just referring very quickly back to the agenda. We have no Form 2s to consider and no Section 31s to consider today. There is one that is in the process for the City of Gosnells, a place of worship, which is going through SAT at the moment. And with that, with no further business, I'd like to thank Councillor Good and Councillor Baines for attending and the other panel members for their participation. Thank the City staff, presenters and Secretariat. Draw the meeting to a close at 10:20.